Welcome to another interview episode of our podcast. I have the privilege of being joined today with Tommy and Lorne Millar. Thank you for making time to do this, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Wonderful to have you. Great to partner with you in the gospel with 20 Schemes. So you're visiting here from Glasgow. You were here during a missions conference, and we're taking an opportunity just to sit down and talk with you a bit more while you're here. I know you've got plans for the rest of your time, heading to Niagara Falls today, Toronto tomorrow. So I hope you enjoy those sites while you're here. For those of us who don't know you, why don't you just each give us a little bit of where you're from, how you came to Christ, how you met each other, just a little bit of sort of introductory bio stuff.
Cool. Will I go first? Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Tommy Millar. I'm now pushing 50 years old. I was brought up in a small town called Dunoon in the west of Scotland, and wasn't brought up in a Christian home, brought up in a Catholic, I suppose it was a mixed home.
Okay.
You know, my father was Protestant, my mother was a Catholic. But most people in Scotland at that time, or even now, don't really practice their religion, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I came to faith later in life, about 18, through my parents who had got saved a number of years before that.
Okay.
Yeah, so as soon as I got saved, I was just loved God's word,
Right.
and got right into God's word. Wanted to study it. Went to Bible college, so about 19 in the mid 90s. So it seems like a lifetime ago
Sure.
now. Yeah. Laurie and I got married during that time also.
Where did you two meet?
We actually met in the local Baptist church,
Okay.
Dunoon Baptist.
Yeah.
Although being a small town, our families knew each other for a number of years before.
Okay.
That.
All right.
It's one of those kind of towns.
Yeah.
Everyone intermarries. I was a youth pastor for about 10 years in Glasgow. Then I left the ministry for a while just to pursue a different direction. Joined the police. Worked in the police for a number of years in Paisley.
Mm-hmm.
It's a town near Glasgow. Then Lorne kind of got into 20 Schemes. Then I kind of joined her in that. And then eventually 2018 we church planters, and that's where we are today.
Sure. Great. Lauren, tell us a bit of your background, your story.
So, yeah, I'm from the same hometown as Tommy.
What age were you when you first met, or when you would have first interacted with each other? Do you remember?
Well, that sounds worse than it was because he's 4 years older than me.
Okay.
We kind of, as he says, like our families knew each other, but we wouldn't have spoke to each other because, like, I was too cool to talk to him. But we eventually ended up in youth fellowship together, so that's how we became friends.
Okay.
But I got saved in Dunoon through a mission team that came from the States called the Royal Servants, and it was basically some teenagers there that shared the gospel with me and led me to Christ. Yeah.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, as Tommy says, we moved to Glasgow for his work, and we had our family young. I stayed at home looking after the kids. And then eventually went and I had my education as an adult.
Yep.
And I studied health, fitness and exercise. And I worked with NHS for a while. And it was during that time that I realised I'm going into maybe clinics and hospitals in Glasgow trying to help people.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't matter if I'm trying to help them to stop smoking, they're still on the road to hell.
Right.
And it's actually the best way I can help them is by sharing the gospel.
Amen.
Which you can't do for the NHS.
Yeah, that's National Health Service for those of us who are not from that part of the world.
Yeah, and it would definitely be a policy where you cannot share your faith with patients. So I'd say to Tommy, I had really felt like maybe the Lord was calling me to Bible college, and he said, well, if you feel that call, it's not a call that you can ignore.
Sure.
And so it was kind of funny because it was like he was in the Christian world, a Christian vocation, while I was working like in gyms and the NHS, and then he came out of the church situation to go into the police, while I then went into ministry and or Bible college. I studied with Faith Mission Bible College, and so then at that point we had a chat, like, you know, God must be calling us to do ministry together.
Sure.
You know, why would he have us both, you know, go and study theology to then
Sure.
not use it?
Right,
you know,
right, yeah. And it sounds like from what you're saying that both of you, part of what drove you to do what you're doing is your experience outside of the Christian environment, you in the police force, you in the NHS, and you're just seeing the needs that exist. And so I've heard you say, Tommy, as well, that you probably learned as much, if not more, about that while being a police officer than
that's
a youth pastor.
Yeah, that's true. I think that, the way I seen it was that just my eyes were open to a world that I hadn't experienced before. Worked in a wee place called Ferguslie Park in Paisley, which was at the time was like for 12 years running was like the worst place in Scotland, the most deprived. So your eyes were opened. You saw a massive need, and it was only when we heard about 20 schemes and then a church planting organisation we thought the penny dropped.
Right.
The penny dropped. We thought there's no churches in these places,
right?
None whatsoever. So we just felt so the Lord was bringing us to this point, and we felt let's just go for it.
Sure.
Yeah, plant a church.
Do any of you, both of you, remember the moment when it was that can you go back to a moment and recall that let's plant a church? Like, do you remember that moment? What was going on exactly at that moment, or was it more a gradual thing?
I think for me, I definitely knew. I knew the moment. I was out for a walk on. I don't know if you know the Cathkin Braes, which are like, when you're in Glasgow, there's like one sort of hill where there's a lone wind turbine up behind a scheme called Castlemilk.
Yep.
And I was up there walking, and like I just knew, and I was almost scared to tell Tommy, like, this is what I think God's calling us to, because we were living in quite a nice wee affluent village, in the suburbs, and it would be a big cost for us to do that. But I remember the moment and being a bit nervous to say, Tommy, I think this is the actual place that God's leading us to. But I think there was different, when you look back, there was different indicators for us, like God was putting different things in our path that made it obvious. So I guess, Tommy, the first church planters in Glasgow were two guys called Pete, and Pete Bell had been actually at one point a boy that was in one of Tommy's youth events.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So do you know Pete Bell?
I've not met them. I've interacted with them, and we've supported them. And one of my cousins actually was baptized at Hope Lanark.
No way, really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there's a connection there.
Because we know all the guys there, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And so what had happened was I had heard Pete Bell and Pete Stewart doing an interview for like a local Christian radio station.
Okay.
And that was at the same time as me being on a short course at Faith Mission, where Doc Fooder from he was at Biola and he was at Moody Institute, and he was teaching us for a week. And we also got taken to a lecture by Mes McConnell down at Nidri Community Church. So this was all happening at the same time.
Wow.
The local boys hearing from Mes and hearing from Doc Fooder. And so Tommy came and sort of got involved with that and got behind us. And so that was our first church plant, was in Hope Lanark. We were the founder members.
Oh, I didn't know that, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, wow, all right.
So who's your cousin?
Matt. His name is Matt. It was just during COVID.
Oh, right, okay, that's excellent.
So he was here. I hope he doesn't mind me telling some of his story on the internet. He was here for a year in Canada, and his last Sunday night, we had Stephen Crenshaw from 20 Schemes here to talk to the church about 20 Schemes, and I was sharing my story about growing up in Cumbernauld. And so Matt got connected with Stephen, and then Stephen invited him to, I think there was a weekend or a conference or something, when he was back in Scotland. So they connected then in Scotland, and then that connected Matt with the church, and then that's where he ended up coming to faith and being baptized. And so that's the story. So yeah, it was kind of like a Canada, United States, Scotland kind of combination thing. So that's how I ended up getting connected with those guys.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, I think with the first time it was the only, Hope Lanark was the only church that I think I knew of that was happening in Glasgow when it was it the first one?
Yeah.
And so just seeing that work being done, having grown up in some similar environments, having never met a Christian that I can recall outside of a Roman Catholic setting, and never really remembering a church, I was like, oh, we need to get behind this. I need to get behind this. So my heart was so pulled because of what was being done there. And so that was my first exposure to 20 schemes. But and then how about you? So Lorne sounds like she was first out the gate, Tommy. So how did that happen for you guys after?
Yeah, I suppose I was a bit slower on the uptake, as it were. Lorne was kind of, as soon as she heard about 20 schemes and got kind of wind of it, she was just right in and just loved it. I was in the police. I suppose I quite enjoyed my job. I enjoyed what I was doing, and I felt as though I was going to maybe just support Lorne in her role for a while. But I think it was a survey that a guy called Alan McKnight done in Govan. What's it? Harper Memorial Church in Govan. He done a survey, and I just remember the chart basically showing, and I think I showed it in the church. Basically, the chart showed that the poorer the community, the less chance it would have of having a church. Yeah. And I think at that point, that was really the moment for me.
Okay.
But I thought, well, we really need to be, and so it wasn't like a voice from heaven. It was like, there's the need, let's go.
Right.
And once we'd made that decision, you know, the rest of it was actually quite easy.
Sure.
You know, when I put my notice into the police, it was no problem at all. There was no, and I suppose for most people, the biggest thing is leaving where they live to moving into the scheme. Is nobody does it.
Sure. Everybody's moving out if they even do that, right?
Exactly, yeah. If they can, they leave. So that was the biggest thing for us. But even the kids were quite up for it. They didn't seem phased by it at all.
Okay, so amazing.
It was good, yeah.
Good. So you're engaging with God's word, you're seeing the need, and in God's providence, these different components are being orchestrated, put in front of you, and now here you are. And I thank God for that. If you could go back to those moments you've just described after now 5 years, if I have that timing right, what would you say to yourself back in those moments? What have you learned? What wisdom would you give? What advice? What cautions? Someone listening is thinking about doing something similar. What would you say to yourselves to help them as they think about something like this?
Apart from don't do it.
Yeah, don't say that.
I would definitely say that the last 5 years have been probably the hardest years of our life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Appreciate the honesty.
Definitely. So there's no doubt about that. We try not to paint a rosy picture.
Good.
But it's definitely been probably the toughest years of our life.
And that's coming from someone who was on the police in one of the hardest places. And
yeah, I mean, I think that even when I was a youth pastor as well, it was a fairly mixed area, but and through the police, and we kind of talk about it. I don't remember ministry being this hard.
Okay.
You know.
Okay.
So that for me it's just a learning curve. But yeah, it has been really tough. I think that the environment can be quite difficult to work in at times. You get a lot of heartache. You see a lot of people go. You know, you see so many people that come right up. You know, they'll profess faith and they'll be walking with the Lord, and then they just disappear.
Okay.
It happens so often. People don't stay the course.
Okay.
So we've never witnessed as much as that previously.
Sure.
So that's quite heartbreaking for people that you love, you care for, and some of them live with you for a period of time. For them to walk away. So that's been a really tough experience as well.
Okay.
Yeah. What about yourself?
Yeah, I was going to say they either walk away or they actually pass away, because there's so much death in the schemes generally, but there's also been death within, people that we've been ministering to and that kind of thing as well. So, it's sad and it's tough. I think for myself would be, if anyone's thinking about it, really do your homework. And, it's not dissimilar to what Brad was saying the other night, where we have to make sure that people are prepared for what they're coming to.
Right.
And even if you speak English, you might be thinking, well, that's only, the barrier's not there with the language. But even for us coming from one side of the city to another was a culture shock.
Sure.
And I found it quite intimidating at times, maybe a bit scared at times. But I think that if I'd maybe understood the culture better, I might not have been as intimidated or as scared, and then realised that, just because a woman batters a skateboard off another woman's face in your front garden doesn't mean to say they won't be friends next week.
Okay,
You know, so
sure.
while I'm screaming and crying,
Yeah.
you know, they become friends
Right,
afterwards. So there's massive things like that that are maybe helpful as coping strategies.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, that's really helpful. That's the reality. There's sorrow, there's joy, there's hardship. There's no substitute for adequate preparation, right, to help you be sustained and to have longevity in what God is calling you to do. So appreciate your insights. You've described a little bit of some of the difficulties of being in church planting where you are. Anything else you could just help us understand about the place where you are? I haven't even asked you that question. Where are you involved in church planting? And this might sound like you're repeating yourselves because you've had this conversation, I'm sure, many times, but people will forget and other people will listen. So you're not boring me at all. So
Yeah. So we're in northwest Glasgow. The church building is in Lamb Hill, which may mean something to the listeners. I don't know. Northwest Glasgow. So it's Mary Hill is where we live. Lamb Hill is where the church building is. And round about that area, there's areas called Summerston. There's Rock Hill. There's Postle. There's Springburn. Some of these places may mean something to.
sure.
So that's where we are. And we look to serve just as wide a range of people as we can. Try and be effective, because none of these other areas which I've mentioned, or a few of them I should say, would have a kind of a healthy gospel church.
Sure.
So yeah, that's where we are.
Good. And you guys live on one of the highest points in Glasgow, the highest hills. Is that true?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, one of the guys tells us that the street that we live in, or at the very top of the street, is the highest point in Glasgow
There you
City.
go. Okay, so you can see the whole city.
Yeah.
That's right.
How big is the scheme where the church meets?
So Lamb Hill itself is probably one of the smaller schemes. It's a small. It used to be like a village way back when it was like a coal mining village.
Right.
You know, back in the day. But the scheme was kind of built round about it. So Lamb Hill, I don't know numbers wise, probably maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people. But if we were to put a pin in a map and draw a mile radius round about it, we're probably hitting 50,000 people.
Okay.
And a cluster of schemes.
Right.
And there is a lot of crossover. I think that some places are quite territorial, but I think because there's such a lot of crossover in our bit, it's almost like this one big,
Okay.
massive scheme.
Got it. And there's one church, one gospel preaching church that you know of. Is that true?
Yep, there's one or two other maybe community churches
Right.
who I'm sure are good people with good hearts. But I think that what we try and do is build a kind of healthy, gospel-centered ministry around everything, and just yeah.
And one of the reasons that we're thrilled to partner with you is not only your focus on the gospel, but also in establishing a healthy biblical church, right? Where there's good ecclesiology, the ordinances, elders, deacons, like that's your aim, right? Is to establish a healthy biblical church and not just, as you say, water down, give the scraps of theology to people living in the schemes as though they can't handle the full scope of what the Bible teaches. And so I really admire that about 20 schemes and about what you guys are doing there. So
I would definitely say that's true. I think that in our experience, that one of the things that happened in Scotland, especially amongst maybe mission halls, which has sprung up all over Glasgow, was that the ecclesiology was non-existent.
Right.
So they were just people gathering together to worship, to sing songs,
Sure.
full of believers, Christians, but they just hadn't fixed the ecclesiology.
Right.
There was no elders, there was no
Right.
deacons. It was just, it was run by committees.
Right.
So yeah, that's one of the things that
No baptisms.
no baptisms.
No baptisms, yeah.
Baptism wasn't a thing for
Sure.
most of them as well. So so that was so we try and build in the biblical ecclesiology.
That's great.
Yes, because people, we believe, can handle it. It's God's word. So God enables people to get a grip of it,
Yeah,
understand it. Yep, for sure.
That's good. Amidst the hardships, what are ways you've seen God at work in people's lives? Paul's phrase, sorrowful yet rejoicing. So I don't want to gloss over what you've said about the reality of what's been hard and some of the things you've seen, and that scene you described, Lorne, I'm sure is just the tip of the iceberg of things you've witnessed. Where have you seen God at work, and you just that's encouraging.
I think, well, like we've seen him work a lot, and it's hard to sort of like say that one thing's better than the other, because they're all good. But I think a very significant illustration would be with Carol, who is maybe like a 56-year-old woman from another scheme in Glasgow, Drumchapel.
That's where my dad's from.
No, is it?
Yeah.
Well, he probably would know her family because they've got a reputation.
Okay.
So Carol, she's about 56 years old, but she's been or had been a drug addict for 40 years.
Wow.
And one day in church, a few years ago, she actually approached us and basically walked in and came up to us and said, "I need help." She just rhymed off all the issues with her family, drugs throughout the family, violence throughout the family, gangsters in the family, homosexuality in the family, chaos, suicide, you name it, it's there.
Where do you start, right?
Exactly. And so anyway, but in a nutshell, she fell on her knees to the Lord and asked him to help, and he has done that. She was ready to take her life one night. She was ready to take her life because she knew that if she was going to try and withdraw from heroin, that the withdrawals, would be so horrific that she couldn't cope with the withdrawals, so she would rather end her life than withdraw from that. But as she says, Jesus turned up, and from there she went on a methadone plan. Then a year passed in August, we started a cut down with her, so she came off methadone and onto another, just a tablet that then helps you to cope with the withdrawals of coming off methadone.
Sure.
And like this week is her sort of like final tablet.
Amazing.
Yeah, and she will say she never stops praising Jesus. Like anybody in her way, the taxi drivers, the people at the shops, she's praising Jesus. She had actually a breast cancer diagnosis a few months ago, which was another challenge. But even when we were at the clinic, I was with her and we were waiting for the results. And she said to the nurse, "What's wrong with your face? Even if I'm going to die, I know where I'm going. I'm going to the King of Kings, my Father."
Yeah.
And I felt ashamed because I would never come straight out like that. And so she was not worried about facing death. Anyway, as it happens, she got the lump removed, and tomorrow she starts her first lot of radiotherapy.
Okay, got it.
But her life is transformed, and it's not only that, and it's not only about her sharing the gospel with people, but she actually wants to learn. She's got a thirst to learn.
Amazing.
And even though she's not had an education and she's not great at focusing on a book, her desire's there, and we're just finding ways that we can sort of adapt books and teaching for her. So that's just one example.
Sure. The Lord is so gracious and merciful, isn't he? And then those who have been forgiven much, love much. And I'm hearing that come through in the way that Carol is going and telling everyone about what Jesus has done for her. So that's incredible. Thanks for sharing that. Anything you want to add, Tommy?
Yeah, I think that for us, we just love to see God at work in others, and I think that's the only thing that keeps you going. It's well, not the only thing, but it's one of the main things that gives you the strength to continue.
Sure.
It's just the Lord encouraging your heart through Him working in other people and building them in their faith. And Carol's probably the best example. One of the best examples. We have Brian also, who I've mentioned before. Just a man that has never looked back. He got saved and just been on a forward trajectory the whole time. So I hope he's not listening, because he'll get a big head.
You've left him alone for a week. I think it'll get knocked down a wee bit if he's.
Yeah. So that's right. So somebody that's been in addiction for most of his adult life and out of prison, life utterly chaotic, to a point where you can literally leave him in charge of your church.
Sure.
So yeah, he's been doing that for the last week. So
amazing.
We'll see how things are when we get back.
When you get back.
I may have to update this.
I wondered if I could just quickly share
please, absolutely.
another way of God working. So on Saturday, I was obviously here sharing with
Yeah.
the ladies
Thanks for doing that.
at Hespler, and I gave one tiny, I dropped somebody's name in a man called Robert that lives across the road from the church, and I happened to mention that Claire that lives across the road from the church is constantly pointing Robert to us. She's a Catholic, but she
Wow.
keeps saying,
Okay.
you need to go and speak to Lorne and Tommy. And Robert is an alcoholic. He is probably drinking himself into the grave.
Right.
The ambulance is there all the time. So I'd mentioned that to the ladies on Saturday just as a passing comment. But when we arrived home on Sunday, we had a text message to say that Robert came across to church on Sunday.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And this man who is Roman Catholic has come to church, and it was Carol that greeted him at the door.
Amazing.
You know,
Wow.
the former addict. Shook his hand, said hello to him, and Brian went and
Sure,
sat and spoke
sure.
with him. So
Fantastic.
yeah. And we
That's-
didn't even need to be there for that to happen.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's
God's
incredible.
good.
But that's what you want.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, right? You use the phrase Indigenous to describe people who are born, raised in the schemes. That's what you want to see eventually happen.
Yeah.
And then maybe you go somewhere else, or maybe they go to another, right? That's what you're wanting to see is the sort of perpetuation or the continuation of healthy churches. So that's wonderful trajectory. Yeah, it's good. Why aren't there more church planters in the schemes in Scotland?
Yeah, I suppose we're asking ourselves the same question. You know, when Mez and the team started this, it was like 20 schemes. He wanted to call it 50 schemes.
Oh, really? He
But
did? Okay. 20 schemes in 10 years or something, was that the goal or something like that?
I don't even know if there was a year.
A time frame? Okay,
but it was
okay.
just 20 churches. Anyway, so we would be there, I think, if we had more willing planters.
Right.
Because the opportunities are definitely
Sure.
there. And I think haven't counted, but I know of at least 4, maybe 5 genuine opportunities ready to go, but nobody that we're aware of is applying to be a planter. So that's within Scotland, and I think certainly within the last few that I have in the last few years, 3 of them have been American,
Right.
coming from the States. So yeah, there doesn't seem to be an appetite within Scotland for men and women who are part of maybe a bigger church
Right.
to be a part of the solution.
Sure.
So I don't know the answer to why they're not doing it, because we're still scratching our heads as
Sure.
well.
I
But yeah.
guess so that it's just because, you know, if you think about everything we've just described in our lives, it doesn't really sound appealing.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's, you know, to come to leave a comfortable, quiet home, to going to basically live in a noisy, chaotic scheme where everyone's in your business, and you might witness things that you don't want to witness. So
Sure.
it's not really got a good USP.
Sure. But as we've been hearing over the course of this missions conference that we've been a part of together, that the command is to go and make disciples everywhere. And so, yeah, how are we going to respond to that? Are we going to obey? Or are we going to not? And so that's something that we all have to come to terms with. And I'll say this because maybe you don't want to, because I'm not there, and if you want to edit it out, you can. But I have no idea whatsoever why there's not financial support, at least coming from within the churches in Scotland. Like, there's no reason you should be sitting across from me in Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. Right? Like, there's no way that, like, people coming from the United States to bring the gospel back to a place where it used to emanate from, it's just devastating to think about. And I scratch my head at that too. I actually think it's an indictment against the churches that are there, and they're not responding to the need that's in their back door. And maybe we're not doing the same thing here in Canada, but maybe it's easy to miss the things that are right in front of your face. I don't know, but it's strange.
Well, yeah, I would definitely say that was true, and I think that it's, maybe that is a reason why the church is in a poor state. It's because there's a lack of understanding of the environment,
Sure.
a lack of understanding of the need, and yeah, maybe still people are still living with the vague notion that we are still a Christian
Right,
nation, and
right.
because there are some churches which are quite big, you know,
Mhm.
with 200, 300, 400 people, and I suppose if you are within a church of 2 or 3 or 4 or 500 people,
And that's all you see.
that's all you see.
You think, oh, this is all right.
Yeah, what's the
Mhm,
problem?
mhm.
But yeah, so this is why this for me, I probably was in that position,
Right,
you know, 5-6 years ago, and it was only when I saw that survey which showed you, no, that's not the reality
Right,
for
right,
most of
right.
it. So, but yeah, I think Mez tried at the start, and I think he just got people just looking at him with a blank face.
Okay.
So he went elsewhere, and we thank God that others, you know, responded.
Sure.
And give, because otherwise, honestly, it just wouldn't be happening,
Right,
because there's no support.
Right.
I don't know as well though. Like, I think definitely across the pond there's a different culture. Like you guys, like for us to even maybe try and talk about finances in Scotland is quite taboo,
Right,
and there's this maybe just this blanket answer of the Lord will provide, which He does.
Sure.
But you guys are much more open about and frank about finances,
Sure.
and,
Okay.
and we're not. And I
Okay.
suppose Tommy and I are like that ourselves. We just don't like to talk about
Sure.
it. It's awkward.
Yeah, you don't want to seem like a chancer, right?
Yeah,
when you're
yeah.
bringing up money. And one of the things that, so I've been in Canada since 2001. So I've spent more than half my life in this country now. I was there last year. That's when we first met in person, was last year. And I hadn't been back to Scotland since 2007. So it'd been a long time. And I was amazed at how so much was exactly the same. Even in the high school that I went to, I have a much younger cousins, same teachers. It just, so much, it was the same. And it just helped me realize how Canada's such a young country, relatively speaking, and Scotland's a much older country. And I think the pace of change is just radically different. And so I think that maybe there's just a different dynamic there. And it helped me just think that, I was just sort of like, oh yeah, right. And so when you're looking at shifting things even within the church and addressing need that's there, culturally, that might just be a dynamic that takes longer than it maybe would in North America, because things haven't been there as long or cemented as long. Or so I'm wondering if that's part of the human reason for why that might be the case, and there's just a sort of natural or a national or historical, cultural aspect to that. You can correct me if you think I'm nuts, but I've been thinking about that anyway. So.
Yeah, I think that's probably got something to do with it. Like, certainly a lot of churches in Glasgow who were founded maybe on the mission hall idea would certainly say, if we just do what we did 100 years ago,
Right.
then that'll fix the problem.
Sure.
And that's what they've been trying for the last 50 years,
Okay.
and it hasn't worked.
It's not working.
So we just go back in, and again, we just hit the reset button, say the baggage, the traditions, they mean nothing. Let's just move forward with what a biblical ecclesiology looks
Right.
like, and share the gospel. So we're not doing anything new.
No,
You know,
that's the you don't have to.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I think that's got a lot to do with it as well. Just that kind of mindset. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for the privilege that we have of partnering with you guys. So thankful for the work of 20 Schemes. If you are listening to this and you just want to have your heart stirred, there's albums, 20 Schemes albums recorded by people from the churches in the Schemes. Music is fantastic. The lyrics are deep, gospel saturated. You can buy those as a way to support 20 Schemes. You can visit their website. You can consider things like internships. Talk about ways that people could engage with 20 Schemes or with what you guys are doing specifically. How could they do that?
We could sign up for our newsletter. So I don't know if that's sort of like available from the church.
Yeah, we can put stuff in the show notes
Yeah.
so people can click links and stuff like that. So,
Yeah,
good.
so we send out like a sort of newsletter. Normally we do it in the form of a video.
I enjoy watching those.
So we do that a few times a year, so that's a good way to be connected. I think as well for the women, if they're interested in blogs or just advice for ministry, we do a monthly women's newsletter at 20 Schemes.
Great.
So they can sign up for that at women@20schemes.com. So they can keep in touch with what's going on there. Yeah, I think, and just the 20 Schemes website would give up-to-date information for us as well, I think.
What about people showing up? Could people come?
Yes, we'd love people to show up, come and get experience. And again, that doesn't have to even be for an internship, because you could just come, you know, on a holiday visa or something like that,
Sure,
and
yeah.
then we'll still put you to work. So yeah, come and visit if you want to think what would an internship
Sure,
look like.
yeah.
Because that's, although it's helpful for church, it's also encouraging for us.
Absolutely,
You know, we
yeah.
like to have company and friends, because that's something actually you don't, sometimes are a bit low on the ground with actual friends.
Right, right.
So that kind of thing, I think we'd like to see people.
Okay, good. Tommy, anything from you on that front?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, we do have a lot of people who come to visit all the different church plants of all age ranges.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many of them would be students.
Mhm.
You know, so you may have, maybe there's students listening who try to figure out, you know, what they want to do, where they
Sure.
want to go. So yeah, it'd be a great opportunity for them to come, you know, for a week, for 2 weeks, for 3 months,
Mhm.
whatever,
Mhm.
whatever it happens to be. And if a 2-year internship, you know, is the way forward in that
Mhm.
for them, then that's good as well. Gives you great opportunity to do ministry experience. But yeah, that's not for everybody, but some
Right.
people just may want a week or two just to try and get their head around it.
Sure.
So,
And
yeah,
the
lots of
thing is
opportunity.
as well is that might not even necessarily be with our particular scheme, because as Tommy said, there's so many other schemes that
Yes.
are trying to build their team,
Yeah.
and they're waiting for people.
Sure.
You know, so we might not need, we might need an intern, but we don't need maybe another women's worker, but we
Right.
know like 5 guys that do,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
so yeah, I think, and Scotland's small, we're all tight knit, like
Right.
you've just said about Hope Berlanark, but like they're our family as
Sure,
well,
that's
so it's
right.
not like
Well-
you have to come to Lamb Hill and then you would, or somewhere else and then never see us.
Sure.
We're all close.
Well, the
so.
saying is that in North America, 100 years is a long time, and in Europe, 100 miles is a long way. And so, yeah, you are all tight, because
Yeah.
Scotland can almost fit in one of the lakes in
Yeah.
Lake Ontario. So it's small, so you're never far away. But well, that's really helpful. So follow through if you're listening. If you're interested in more, there's things you can click, things you can listen to. And if we keep talking about this any longer, I'm going to want to come back with you. So thank you so much, guys, for
Well,
joining
thank you.
us. And we are absolutely thrilled to partner with you in the gospel. So keep fighting the good fight of the faith.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.